Hello, welcome back everyone. The new episode, Reigniting the Fragments of the Fourth Way with Peter Ingle and Mihai Algiu, and you have a playlist here with the previous dialogues. And we started 2 episodes ago to go into the knowledge of the human types based on the Fourth Way Enneagram, and episode 34 was on general knowledge about the type, how to use this knowledge better, how it connects to awakening, how it differs from other typologies. And last week in episode 35, we actually dealt into 2 of the core Enneagram types, the lunar and the Venusian type, and we are going to continue now. We'll go straight into it with 2 other types, with the aim of covering all the types in the Enneagram. And once we finish them, we are going to have perhaps another episode or so about mixed types, because what we are going to discuss today, the Mercurial type and the Saturn type, when we teach it like that, that's for pedagogical reasons, and it's almost, in reality, we are slightly mixed type. We are a combination of 2 or 3 types being anchored in one of them, and now how we teach it is more like almost a caricature, but at the same time it is not. These are the core features: physical, physiological, energetic, psychological, emotional, mental, a way of relating to life, to everything. They do hold truth as it is. Any other thought, Peter, before we go into the next one?
I don't think so. No.
All right. So next type on the Enneagram, and we are going on a certain path.
I can share this if you want.
Yeah. A certain path, a certain the types on the Enneagram, they don't mix arbitrarily, and they follow a certain trajectory. And we started last time from the moon, the lunar, going down towards the Venusian. And today we are going up on the Enneagram to Mercury, the Mercury type. It's an active, masculine, and negative type. And it's interesting to consider some of the ancient cultures like Greek and Roman. They perhaps used some of their gods or their famous gods as a way to portray some core psychological human components. And in those mythologies, Mercury or Hermes, in Greek and Roman mythology, they represented the Mercury type. And it's interesting that the Mercury was the messenger of the gods. So he was the guy who had wings at his feet. He was very quick, nimble, and he was dealing with this communication, receiving messages and passing them on like that, being quick, nimble, skilled at communication. The other mythology, Hermes, was supposed to be a protector of commerce, trade, and thieves, which is interesting. And all of this that we mentioned so far, being quick, being nimble, being good at communication, and quick-bodied and quick-witted, these are core tendencies or features of the Mercury type, as well as this being entrepreneurial, being involved with commerce and money, hustler, so to say, entrepreneurial, as well as it is known that among all the types, the Mercury, they have a certain propensity towards breaking the law, or having some more, like, let's say, criminal tendencies, it's not that the Mercurials are criminals at all, but there is a certain tendency. I have some of this type myself, and I could see even from an early age certain tendencies coming from a good family. There was a tendency towards stealing or doing various things. So it's interesting that in the Roman mythology, that's a protector of commerce, economy, and thieves. Any thoughts from here, Peter?
I always have appreciated being able to look at the types when learning about them, to see the parallel. Again, we've mentioned it before, but the parallel between the planet and the gland and the body type and the psychology and behavior of the body type. And in this case, Mercury is the smallest planet. And the mercurial body type in most instances is a small type. It's rare to find a mercurial type, a mercurial male over 6 feet tall. I mean, there are exceptions, of course, to this. There are exceptions to all these things we're talking about. But in general, mercurial is a smaller type, a pure mercurial type. Like the planet, and the planet is also very bright in the sky from Earth. It's very near to the sun. It orbits the sun very quickly. And the mercurial type is quick, like this planet moving around the sun. The mercurial type is bright-eyed, bright teeth, a bright smile, can be very perky, sort of slightly mischievous, but in an entertaining, charming way. And this mercurial type brightens up the room when they come in. And there's a kind of a percolation. And this small type is not uncommon to find someone who's an entertainer, who likes to be on stage and entertain and tell jokes and make people laugh and say the clever thing. And this ties to this thievery quality that Mihai was mentioning, that it's not that Mercurials are thieves, it's that they're quick-minded. They can kind of see the opportunity and then seize the opportunity. And if that means breaking a little rule, breaking a little law, what's wrong with that, right? There's the opportunity. I'm going to slip through that door while it's open and to take advantage. And that's how the mindset of this type works. And this is why can be so good with money and commerce and entrepreneurship and being what was the word you used? Like a wheeler dealer.
Hassler, yeah.
A hustler, yes.
Yeah.
And so, so that's the nature of this corollary between the planet and the physical aspects and the physical manifestations of this type. And then it gets more interesting when you consider the gland, which is the gland governing this type theoretically is the thyroid. And the thyroid gland is responsible for really regulating the metabolism of our whole body. And it spills its hormones into the bloodstream that affect the entire body and keep this metabolism running at good speed and in good order. But because of this, if you have a little too much thyroid activity, you get a little hyper and your eyes widen and you get excitable. And this is the characteristic of this type. This type is very alive and excitable and charming and bright and entertaining. And it's no accident, given this idea that the gland is influencing the type. And the gland also influences the psychology. Mercurial type is quick. It's interesting, the planet Mercury doesn't have much of an atmosphere, apparently. And Mercurials can sometimes be so quick, cover so much territory, they can do really good on tests, but they're not, it can remain superficial in many instances. There's a lack of depth. There's a lack of, there's no atmosphere. And so also the Mercurials, given this thyroid, it's right here in the throat, and it seems no accident too. Mercurials also often have a deep, beautiful sounding voice. You'll hear this beautiful voice on the radio and you'll think, wow, that's such a massive voice. And then you'll see the person, there'll be a diminutive little Mercury behind this big voice. And it's sort of a compensatory factor in nature, it seems, a little a little creature with a big voice, like a bird or a small animal that has a big voice, this idea. So they go hand in hand. This mercurial type is small, but has this beautiful sonorous voice, big voice. And they often are said to have thick hair, bright eyes, nice teeth. A lot of the other types, male particularly, lose their hair, and even females, their hair thins as they age. This isn't the case necessarily with mercurials. They can have nice thick hair for all of their life. So these are some of the physical and or physiological things that attribute the behavior of the type, and how this gland also affects the psychology, this quick-mindedness of the mercurial too, which lends itself to, as I said, to seeing the opportunity and seizing the opportunity. On the flip side of it, it can make this type suspicious. They are themselves naturally conniving, and so they're kind of looking at other people, and they're just can be suspicious of other people because they're suspecting them of not wrongdoing, but maybe they're trying to slip through the door and gain the upper hand and seize the advantage. And so there's reason for me to be suspicious of them. We used to say too that mercurials are more prone to hypochondria than the other types. It's all like, oh my God, something's wrong. What's wrong with my wrist? And there'll be all this quick mental activity, kind of trying to analyze it, and then it can become anxiety and kind of a worry, kind of a panic. And this mercurial type is quick to react to things when they go wrong like this. And again, remember, it's a negative type. This type is negatively charged. It's active and negatively charged. And as we mentioned, masculine, as you can see here on the screen. So Mercury is often handsome. It can be strikingly handsome. Their facial features and their hair and their teeth and their bright eyes and they're often pleasing to see, to look at. But you want to watch yourself around them. They can be sneaky.
Yeah, I
They're
guess.
good entertainers. Sorry, go ahead, Mihai.
Yeah, I want to say some more on to help with the recognition. So small to medium frame, slender, wiry, athletic, tend to be more darker hair. Usually, of course, depending on the culture. Nimble, quick eyes. You can see this kind of very alertness, scanning the environment, like quick to scan, and they have many thoughts, quick eyes, quick ideas, patient. I would say that I've seen a number of people or friends of mine who are more pronounced Mercury. They have hard time falling asleep in the night because the mind is so active and so many options, and can be plans or scheming or worrying or trying to have it all. Yeah, it's hard for the mind to quiet down, to get into more like a peace and quietness. Um, as
Yes, this is characteristic of the gland too. This thyroid, this thyroid is always pumping, regulating the metabolism. And so the heart rate and the general metabolism. And so this type is known for its kind of ceaseless movement and activity. It's always on the go, and it's not easy. You don't see mercurials sitting around on the couch doing nothing. They're active. They're on the go. It's let's go. What's next? Let's do it. It's a busy-minded, busybody type. Small, usually smaller, very efficient with movement. You see this little simple drawing here of a female mercurial body with the angular shoulders, small. You rarely see an overweight mercurial type. They're small, diminutive, sort of beautifully contoured, and sort of like an efficient animal. And because of this, always on the go, they tend to be more lean. Doesn't mean you can't have some fleshiness and a little extra fat on you if you're mercurial, but by nature of the type, its essence, in essence, this pure mercurial type is moving too often and too efficiently and with too high of a metabolic rate for it to gain weight.
As an example, I guess I have some old examples from the past. Charlie Chaplin, Audrey Hepburn, this kind of smaller frame, beautiful features, quick, witty, smart, charming, catching the light and emanating light. In terms of some of their psychological, let's say, in terms of feature or core psychological energetic pattern, and that's where we, these features are some tendencies that come in essence, so they are innocent and pure in essence, some mode of being, some peculiarity, but as we are asleep and our identity is in the false personality, these patterns, they become a core weakness or core where we are most automatic and compulsive and most identified in sleep. So their propensity of the Mercury is towards vanity and towards mercurial power. We had a set of talks in the playlist where we go in all these features, but there are different types of power. The Mercury, there can be this kind of head-on martial power, we'll see that later, or jovial, mothering, taking care of, leadership power. But the Mercurial, there's this power that has a more of a manipulative nature. It's hard for them to be straightforward. They are avoiding conflict. It's interesting also due to the size. They are smaller size, so their strength is not confrontation, but it's more like avoiding confrontation and having the battle of the wits, being quicker than other types and being smarter and finding a way to get that opportunity or to pull some strings in a way that they end up on top. So this mercurial power, manipulative, a little cunning, a little sneaky, a shadowy presentation of Mercury, I would say, is the character Iago.
I was just thinking that as you were about to say that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that Shakespeare captured this type forever, almost perfectly in that character of Iago. In Othello, the play Othello.
Yeah. And in terms of, and in terms of the other feature, vanity, so there is this kind of active vanity in a sense that feeling the active vanity of the Mercury feels actively of being maybe superior or better, or just because one is quicker, feels like it's smarter than other people. Other people are slow, they are not intelligent enough, they are not beautiful enough, they are not nimble enough, they are not theatrical enough. So since it has all of this quickness and also talents and skills, it may feel tendency to feel better. I'm better, superior. It's a superior type, better, and also wanting to have that fed back. So they like to be in the center of the attention. They like to be on the stage. They like to have something to say. They like to feel important, to be considered important. That's vanity, active vanity, as opposed to the deficient, not good enough, not worthy.
This is a very interesting, we're talking about vanity and power with this type, because there are other body types that also manifest vanity as a chief feature and or manifest power as a chief feature. And it will be interesting as we go through to distinguish between these, because there are different forms of vanity and different forms of power. And as Mihai is saying, the mercurial type is wanting this affirmation. It basically wants to show off. The other types of vanity and some of the other body types, it's not a showing off so much as it is self-congratulatory, self-aggrandizing for itself, not necessarily to get the affirmation back. Mercurial type likes to be funny in order to be laughed at and received, to be recognized as being clever and being funny, being intelligent. So these are nuances, of course, but it's an interesting study. When we say vanity, it's not just one flat thing. It's a theme, and there are many variations on this theme in the different types. And each type manifests some kind of vanity, actually, in order to sustain this feeling of I. And it can be a positive or a negative form of vanity. It doesn't matter. It sustains the feeling of I. But it's very obvious when in the mercurial type, and so it's a good way to see this feature.
I guess some other potential feature would be that you alluded to this not going into depth, being so quick and so talented. They get a lot of mileage through their quick intellect and looking good, appearing smart, making a good impression, being recognized, and they may, yeah, not go in depth enough in something, staying at a shallow, superficial level. And yeah, I think the key word of the Mercurial vanity is wanting recognition.
And even the power that the Mercury manifests is kind of like that. We used to say that if you could line up all the body types and have them walk into a room, the Mercurial would be the loudest. You hear them, their steps when they walk, and their voice and their energy. It's a big energy, which is in contrast to a small physical body often, or smaller physical body. It's again a compensatory thing. They're making up for lack of physical size with a booming voice, loud walk, active demeanor, demonstrative demeanor, and but in a way that's, as was said before, in a way that's charming and entertaining. I do have some pictures here, Mihai, of some, just well-known people. These two gentlemen on the left are Chris Rock, and I forget the other comic. They're both very, very funny. In fact, the other gentleman in the bow tie, he's also a comedian, very funny. Tom Cruise, the famous movie actor. That's Simone Biles, the gymnast. She's petite, but she has these bright eyes and those shiny teeth, and she's broad-shouldered and very active energy. And it's interesting, this is a negative type, and yet look at all of them are smiling and charming. And in fact, all the late night talk show hosts on television, they almost all are either mercurial or have a hefty amount of mercurial. They're entertainers. They're, and they're funny, and they're charming, and they make a good host, and they keep it going and keep it moving and keep it entertaining. And so there are so many other examples, and I want to emphasize too, this is not an exact science. It is a science of sorts, this study of types, and it is also an art, a sort of an intuitive thing. But if I were to put up, how many here? 7 people. If I were to contrast this with 7 lunar body types that we talked about before, I don't have that at hand, but you just see right away that these people here are not lunar types. They're not passive. There's nothing passive about any of these people. They're active, and even though they are negatively charged, this mercurial type can be quite charming, but can also turn negative very quickly.
I guess in terms of their areas of work on themselves, if one is Mercury, definitely find there can be a strong tendency to be in imagination. I mean, for all types is like that, but because they have so much fuel and so much quickness, it can be running many hundreds of miles per hour about anticipating the past or planning the past or anticipating all kind of problems and how would the people think of me. And so I would say strong imagination, inner considering, uh, connected to the vanity and kind of having this compulsion of coming out of oneself, just being some kind of show, to have a show, to be seen, liked, admired, recognized, or feel okay. So that's something to keep an eye on and be less dragged by all of these forces. Also, the tendency could be a tendency towards out of integrity and taking advantage of people and lying. Yeah, lying and hiding. I would say it's for personal interest, lying and hiding in order to avoid getting into trouble or in order to get something. That will be for the Mercury the quickest way to get what I want is to hide and lie, basically, rather than go through the other channels. And that is creates stress, creates a strong sense of separation, and one is in out of alignment.
And if we could strip away the behavior, the outer appearance of behavior of the types, and go behind and look into the psychology with very transparent lens. This is why it's useful when you hear about these types to think about yourself. It's one thing for us to describe this and then you can say, oh yes, I know people like that. That's how they appear. But if you are a mercurial type, you know that inside your mind and inside your body, things are racing. As Mihai is saying, many thoughts, what the fourth way calls many eyes, can happen consecutively in quick order. And this creates this suspicion of this one. What do they think? I better say something quick. I better respond. I better make a joke. I better look. I don't want to get caught. And then it's, I wonder if I need to do that. It's, if you're mercurial type, your mind is racing. If you're a passive type, it's not like that so much. Your mind isn't racing. It's sort of stuck. It's sort of, you're in a quagmire psychologically. You're thinking slowly. You're delving more ponderously in your psychological world. This can't be seen by others, but we can see it inside ourselves, which in itself is very interesting. We can see this non-physical psychological realm in ourselves at work, and no one else can see it. But on the outside, they see this behavior. So we can recognize behavior in ourselves, of course, and in others, but the psychological side is really for personal self-study, to go deeper and deeper inside and see what are the governing principles in the way I think, the way I view the world, the way I respond to the world, and the way I feel about myself. Because what happens is our consciousness, our awareness forms itself, it attaches to and forms itself around this body type. And then we begin to experience ourselves as a feeling of, this is me. I am smart, I am handsome, I am quick-witted, I am good at business, I'm an entertainer, I can get things done, but I'm also suspicious and have lots of thoughts, and I'm always on the go. I can't keep still. I'm fidgeting. I'm restless. And to be able to see all this and understand this is due to body type. It's happening to us. This formation of this feeling of I is happening to us by virtue of the physiology and psychology of our type. This is where this knowledge is so profound and so powerful and so useful the more you get to understand it.
Their maximum attraction, because on the Enneagram, all type, they have some kind of maximum polarity, is with the jovial, because it's being the polar opposite. So you may sometimes see like a wiry, smaller frame, very charming, active male, like an Italian type, so to say. The Italian man is the smaller, handsome. Also, I forgot to say they like to have goatees or really polished kind of facial hair. And also they may like to be fashionable, this goes with vanity, to be liked and special. So you may see a man like that with like a larger, rounder, jovial woman, or the other way around. but that's their maximum attraction. They somehow they go well together. It's almost like the Jupiter jovial we'll go into it. We didn't go into it. Yeah, we'll go into it later, but it's more
We
like a
did it in our
commander.
introductory video, yes. That's
Yeah.
why I brought up this screen to show on the opposite side of the Enneagram is this positive, passive, feminine type, the jovial type, in contrast to its complete opposite, a negatively charged, active, masculine, mercurial. And so they are naturally attracted to one another. It's a mechanical attraction based on type.
Hmm.
This is why you see, there's someone out there for everyone,
Yeah.
so to say, because of this law of types.
And they may have difficulty being really close or friends with the martial type because they are actually pretty similar to them. But the martial, they are more like direct, powerful, almost intimidating, confronting. So their two types of power, they clash with each other. So they don't seem to get along. They don't are not very smooth, dynamic together.
Yes, especially because they're both negatively charged. Of course, they're both active, both masculine. You can see that the Venus and the Jupiter are both passive and positive and feminine, but they can, because of that passivity and positivity, the positive charge, they can share sort of the environment and the space, both physically and psychologically. Mercury and Martial is not so easily the case. In the case of a pure Mercury and a pure Martial.
Yeah.
Just by virtue of this polarity, this negative polarity.
I guess one last idea would be that now we talked about the Mercury as a primary type, but they tend to combine. There's a Venus Mercury. And so a Venus Mercury, if somebody is a lot of Venusian but has some Mercury, that will activate some of the passivity, the so-called softer, mellow, chilled, non-existence, that if one has some more Mercury infused into it, then one will actually be more versatile and have these two sides, one more active and one more passive. So one will have a Venus Mercury, and then the body will change also. Or one can be a Mercury Saturn, and we are going to go into Saturn right now. All right, welcome back everyone. We are going to the next type, the Saturn type. And would you like to start with that, Peter?
Yes. Well, as you can see on this diagram on the screen, this movement toward the Saturnine type is still, like the Mercurial type, active and masculine. Its nature, its chemistry, if you will. But unlike the Mercurial, the Saturn is a positive type. It's positively charged. This is kind of interesting because whereas the Mercurial is very charming, entertaining, and bright, although it's negatively charged, the Saturn, although it's positively charged, can be quite grim and serious and overbearing, as we'll see. But nevertheless, the polarity is positive rather than negative. And again, if we look at the planet and we look at the gland, the planet Saturn, of all the interior planets, it's the one farthest out. It's kind of looking over the entire interior solar system, looking down on it. And it has these large rings surrounding it. It's not easy to get to Saturn by virtue of these rings, just visibility wise. If you were there and you were trying to get to the surface, you'd have to go through all these rings. It's sort of a complex superstructure of a planet. It is one way to say it, maybe. And it's it's remote and inaccessible, or not easily accessible. And this is true of this type. By the way, the planet Saturn, when you include its rings, it occupies the most mass of any planet in the solar system. Jupiter is a bigger body of a planet, but when you add those rings and that that added dimension of the rings. Saturn is this quite enormous, overbearing planet and influence in the solar system. And the gland is the anterior pituitary gland, as you can see. Well, that was on the previous image, but this is the so-called master gland, meaning each of the other glands in the body, they secrete hormones that influence the physiology and psychology in precise ways. This anterior pituitary does that as well, but in addition, it can emit hormones theoretically that regulate the other glands. So in effect, it can dominate the operation of the other glands. And as we'll see, the Saturnine type is a tall, usually the tallest of the types, can be overbearing, can be kind of influence the behavior, the thinking, and the actions of other types. And it's like a parent. It's like a fatherly type, as we'll see. And again, this parallel between the physical planet, how it operates within the solar system and how it influences the other planets. And similarly, the gland, how it operates in the body. It's way up here in our head, this anterior pituitary, and it can govern all these other glands in the body and kind of check on them, monitor them, and make sure they're each doing their job properly. And this is often the case with Saturnine types, as we'll see. They're large, big hands, big feet, square jaw, kind of horsey, sometimes horsey looking men and women. And they're big boned and can be tall, imposing, formidable psychological type.
Yeah, so psychologically, or the way they meet life, I mean, control is very important to them. Controlling themselves, controlling their environment, controlling their weaknesses, controlling their diet, controlling their various things, dominating, self-control. That's somehow emotional for them. It's some kind of way towards mastery, or so they may even have a ascetic tendency to deny themselves or to do various practices like that. There is this like an architectural view. They are more, they tend to see the bigger picture, or they have a systemic way of looking at the situation, and therefore that's why they have a sense of that they understand or they know, and they have to themselves the feeling of that other people don't know and other people are incompetent. So therefore I either I need to do it myself, or I need to find someone that I train to do it. So this assumed incompetence of other people and a sense of feeling oneself as being superior, but not as a vanity way, but to them it feels like they are really superior because that's how it is, because they see further and because they understand what's the problem and they understand what's to be done. And if this tendency is not brought to awareness, then they will have this imagination that, and maybe some truth, that they know what's the problem with each person, what they could do better, what would be a better life program with their body, with their how to handle their relationships, their finances, their diet. They think they know, which is connected to the dominance feature, some natural leadership. You can see even kids that they're really young, that some of them they are start to become the leader, and there's a tendency for other types to seek the leadership of the Saturn, of just simply they're being taller. And we had this saying in the school where we were, the Saturns, they tend to lead the way even if they may not know the way, but they want to lead the way.
I never heard that. That's good.
So although they are active and very dynamic and active and positive type, they may not seem so active from the outside. So from the outside, they may seem pretty rested and settled and quiet and
Slow
introverted.
moving. Yes.
But there is all of this internal. Again, there's an internal planning. Plan to them is very important. What's the plan? What's the structure? What's the bigger picture? Where we are going? There could be a tendency of overthinking things, over too much of a bigger picture, too many options, too architectural to the way that it's hard to act. You know, it's a strong Saturn. It's hard to hesitate. It's a hesitation into what will be the way to act. What's the right thing? Maybe too much in their head.
And if you are a Saturn, you'll recognize this internally in yourself, this inability to make a final decision. And it can be something simple, even in the grocery store, or when you're shopping for clothes, or of course in the business environment. You will have a hard time settling on a final decision because you see the big picture, you see the several or many options, and you see the validity of more than one of them. And it can be quite unnerving for a Saturn to. I have a friend who's Saturn, and they'll often say, "What do you think?" Well, I can't decide. I see, but it's almost painful sometimes for this type to make a decision, and they will keep others waiting. It's a way of this dominance, that they're prone to this, because they're a tall type, physically imposing. Mentally, they have this all-comprehensive view, and they see how the parts relate to the whole. They see, and they can be overbearing physically and psychologically, mentally, and they will keep people waiting while they make their decision. Or internally, they're very active and they're making all these assumptions about other people, and they are feeling that, you know what, I can control myself. I can manage my diet and my finances and my life, and I know how to go through these hurdles in the day or in my life. And I expect that all of you should be able to do the same. And there's a silent assumption that others should be better, others should be more controlled, more self-disciplined, more like me, the Saturn type. That's how this type will. There's this psychological assumption going on along those lines that I just described. And this will come across as kind of a silent, overbearing expectation and almost disapproval if you don't meet that expectation. Saturns can be very disapproving of others, and they will, in indirect and silent ways, let it be known that they disapprove of others. Other types are seen more like, almost like their children. They're lesser qualified beings. Saturns, by the way, when the other types start to talk about the Saturnine type the way we're doing, the Saturns get a lot of grief from the other types because of what I've just said. Saturns can be so overbearing and judgmental, basically, is what it is. It's judgmental. And it can be severe and silent and very unpleasant to be around a Saturn who's kind of looking at you, watching you. Certainly, that's not how I would wash the dishes, but that's how you want to do it. Go ahead. Kind of, it's like that. So, just as we were saying the other day, the last time about the lunar type, we were starting to sort of find all the negative things about the lunar type. And that, so this is characteristic of these types, as I mentioned then. And now, in this case, Saturn's, the other types are always sort of saying, come on, Saturns, lay off of us. Take it easy on us. Control yourself. Don't quit trying to control us, kind of thing.
Yeah, it will be work to learn to accept, to let people be themselves and not interfere, not even in your own head how they should be. Just accept people as they are, let them be, let them make their mistakes. And I mean, on the positive note, I mean, it's a good or certain feature, this kind of ability to teach. They like to teach. and they like to explain, they like to clarify for other people, because they have a in-depth understanding of something that they are interested in, and it's kind of architectural, so it's in compartments, and so it can be useful in terms of a teaching.
They're
Uh,
not big talkers like the Mercurial. The Mercurial type will just talk and talk and talk and entertain and be fascinating and show off their knowledge, their intellect. The Saturn is usually slow speaking, doesn't go on for a long time, but makes a powerful statement in a few words. And as Mihai is saying, make good leaders, good CEOs, sometimes good politicians. They're measured and intelligent, but in a very measured way.
mhm. Yeah, I mean, if you go to these summits, or if you were to see them, these political summits, a lot of people will be tall there. I mean, it's a high concentration of Saturns there, being presidents, being leaders of nations, of companies. Like one of the most classic, some person from the history that was a strong Saturn. It would be Abraham Lincoln. Um,
I have some other pictures here that might
yeah,
help too, and he's among them. You can see Abraham Lincoln there on the top left next to Morgan Freeman.
yeah.
And you can see we went from this mercurial type, very charming and bright-eyed and quick-witted. And now the Saturns, they're more serious. They're positively charged, but look at these. You see the jaw, the angularity of the facial features, the long face, the square jaw, the severe look, kind of, these are serious people, you could say. And they come across and they're imposing too. They're, they look at you, they're in the room with you, and they can be very imposing, domineering, sort of all embracing with their mind and their magnetic presence, not their conscious presence necessarily. Saturns are not more conscious necessarily, but they'll sort of have this, they'll impose their dominance in such a way as to seem as though they are more conscious until you until you understand what consciousness is, and then you realize it's all type, it's all body type. This is all psychology. It's amazing, is it not? We're these creatures, and not only do we have a physiology like the animals in the animal kingdom, we have this thing called a psychology. And when you really start looking at it, it's astonishing. We have a psychology, and that's just a word, but we have this operation of these things in intellect and our emotions mixed with our sensations and our movements and our postures, the way we decide, the way we talk, the way we look at the world, the way we view others, the way we imagine ourselves and view ourselves, and the way we form this feeling of I. It's just all this body type business, and it's amazing. And what we're seeing here with these images in front on the screen are how this psychology emanates through the physical body and through this energy. Look at this energy. It's so characteristic of this type. Long face, square jaw, angular features, very commanding physical presence, can be domineering, make good leaders.
Yeah, some nobility to it
Mhm,
somehow. This imposing, noble.
mhm.
Well, I guess some other tendency would be that I like to look at it like it's almost like you have a big ship. It's a big ship, and so I'm not going to change directions all the time. So it's a little hard to change directions, and it takes time, like like a big train, and it's like, and I noticed this thing like, well, I decided to do that. So I already decided to do that. It's almost like hard to change one's decision and to kind of change a big boat. Other tendency would be that they tend to have a routine. They have their own routine. like go to the same restaurant, they sit in the same place, and they order the same meal because that is what is deemed to be the best one. So why mess it up? Why take any chances? I know what I got. So there's this and which limits our possibilities a lot. It's good work for the Saturn to be open to new things, take a different route sometimes, even as a shock, as a conscious exercise. To be open to new cuisine, to be open. Otherwise, tend to be in a small, although they are big energy and big psychology, they are in a small track and kind of tend to be bland and kind of this serious, heavy, aloof, superior, and sometimes hard to act. So some is good work for them to after all the analysis and all of that to just act, go towards the martial, as you will see on the Enneagram.
We used to say that this type, it can be prone to dullness or
Mm.
grayness and plainness. They'd like to dress in dull colors, gray, not necessarily black, but they're not ostentatious.
Mhm.
They're not what's the word I'm looking for?
Flashy, not
Flashy.
ostentatious, not don't want to
Not a
stick
lot of,
out.
we'll see later, there's a type that loves to wear lots of colors and fabrics and textures, and Saturnines are kind of drab. They're not the fashion experts of the world. And yes, they can have kind of a dull gray, turning into inward, overly ponderous psychology and mind that can cause them to withdraw into themselves, into this big thinking psychological realm where there's so many options that maybe, none of these options are even worthwhile.
Hmm.
And it can become kind of pessimistic, even though this is a positive type. The Saturn can be pessimistic. And this is also becomes part of this judgmental dominance. And this lends itself too to particular kinds of negative emotions. Saturn is not an explosive type. It doesn't explode with anger. It more turns inward with judgment and disapproval. And it can feel, we used to say too, that this type can be prone to a form of self-righteous indignation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm indignant toward you, all of you, and the world, and I am right about
Dismissing,
that. Yes,
dismissal.
dismissive, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so it can become this kind of, it's almost like a disapproving silent anger, but it doesn't explode. Now, Saturn will, given the occasion, will let you know that they disapprove, but it's often indirect. So when it comes to dealing with people and communicating with people directly, Saturns aren't necessarily good at that. They're so indirect, and they can't quite go right at telling someone how they feel, telling someone what they think about what they've done. They will simply express their disapproval. Or they'll withdraw, remain aloof, and just hang on to their judgment, hang firmly onto their judgment of someone or other people, and then maintain what I mentioned, this self-righteous indignation. And it will exude from them as this sort of deep, dark sense of disapproval and rejection.
In terms of their attraction or polarity, the Saturns, they tend to be drawn towards the opposite, a lunar type. Where do we have, yeah, the lunar. It's like the very opposite. It's like a feminine, passive, negative type. Somehow it's very balancing. However, they often feel very comfortable and they are attracted by other Saturns. And it feels like because they somehow feel themselves as a special creature in themselves as being more competent. They feel more competent and more having it more together. They feel comfortable in the presence of another Saturn because it feels like we are in the same clan here.
And this, the characteristic version of this, you see a tall Saturn with a short, a much smaller, sometimes a foot smaller lunar. And you'll see a couple or a pair of friends, a couple of some friends, two friends, one's Saturn, one's lunar. And you can see this dynamic of types in terms of the polarity, the chemistry, the psychology of the types. And the more you study this, the more this starts to reveal itself. This is all verifiable. It's worth underlining that none of this is exact. It's hard to present all this, and it's a challenge sometimes to present this and find photographs and point to examples, because pure types aren't that common. And then when we get into these combination of types across the Enneagram, it can be so subtle sometimes. Someone can be Venusian Mercury, and it's hard to see. Sometimes you see they have a little bit of lunar, but they have a lot of Venusian, and they have some mercurial, physically and psychologically. Similarly, someone can be Venusian, can be centered in Mercury, but have some Venusian still influencing them, and some Saturn tendencies. So it's an inexact science and a very precise art, this study. And it's an endless study for observation to see all of this. Yes, I showed the Saturn types here. And you see, again, this is the tallest type, just to be clear. And this is where we're getting into the mixed types. And this is where you would see this progression we're talking about. Mercury would be usually is a small type. Saturns are very tall, angular, bony. Mercury's can be broad-shouldered, narrowed-hipped, very efficient bodies, quick-moving. And then Mercury Saturn falls in between, both physically and psychologically. Mm-hmm. And I do have some examples here, Mihai, some pictures. You could see more. These are more Mercury Saturn types. These are people who have Mercury, but they're tending toward also having Saturn. Mm-hmm. There's still a glimmer in their eye. Mm-hmm. They're not quite that severe Abraham Lincoln look, but you can see they're tending in that direction, but they still have a twinkle and a glimmer. And this is often a very attractive type too. Mercurial can be glamorous and charming and entertaining. And the Mercury Saturn, because it's a little more mature, the Mercury type is almost an immature type in some ways. This small diminutive planet is somewhat can be tend toward immature behavior, sort of childlike, kind of showing off, being braggadocious. Now they're getting more serious, these Mercury Saturns, but they still have that flair and that charm. And you can kind of see here on the left, I put two types that represent Mercury, more closer to pure Mercury, and in the middle, Mercury Saturn, and then on the right, tending towards Saturn. And you can see it goes from being kind of charming and being a little more in control, you might say, and then tending toward domineering and severe.
Yeah, we'll see as we go further, the Saturn Mars gets more like a Viking warrior. Well, I feel like we have covered here quite a bit what we wanted to cover for this, and so we encourage listeners to just see where you find yourself. You may find yourself in different, you just make some notes and where you recognize yourself. And then as we go through all the types in the mixed type, it will become more clear to you. You can bring it to us, especially if you are in our groups. All right, Peter. Thank you.
I wanted to mention too that if you watch this and you have questions, you can also contact us. It's easy to find us through the websites, through the YouTube channel. We each have our YouTube channel. And you can also, in your comments, let us know if you have questions or
Yeah.
things. This is a valuable area, and it's multifaceted. It's never ending. And so it's good to talk about it, not to assume one thing and then take these as definitions, but to take this as a starting point. We're offering all this as a starting point for self-observation and observation of others, and observations of how humanity operates according to the laws of human types, body types. And there's a lot to learn here, and it is very worthwhile to talk about it together.
All right. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Mihai.